Hello there and welcome to News in Depth. My name's Don Arleth and let's go ahead and get started. It's been 1 year since U.S. President J.D. Vance shook Europe to the core in a scathing speech at the Munich Security Conference. This year, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will address leaders and policymakers in Munich, which will take place on Saturday. But for the purposes of today's edition of News in Depth, let's take a look at the developments over the past year post J.D. Vance speech in Munich. For this, I'm joined by TVP World's political writer, Stuart Dowell. Hello, Stuart, and it's great to have you in again, and this looks like a good topic of discussion.
For sure.
Yes, so, well, for a reminder for everybody, at last year's Munich Security Conference, J.D. Vance criticized Europe over the Romanian elections, NATO defense spending, immigration, and quelling freedom of speech. Now, did this jolt Europe into action, or did this just start a long year of friction and disbelief?
Did it jolt Europe into action? For sure it did, yeah. There's been so much talk over the year of from commentators, journalists, pundits, from everyone that Europe needs to wake up. It's an unending chorus that Europe's sleepwalking, but really Europe has woken up. It's gone through this kind of the stages of grief, from denial, depression, through to acceptance, and it's done that through the classic European mechanisms, which are raising money, creating systems to spend on defence, particularly the Security Action for Europe SAFE mechanism, which allocated 150 billion euros, also by taking over the role of the financer of Ukraine, with its loan of 90 billion euros. And also, that's at the European level, but let's not forget probably one of the biggest events of the year, which is Germany's program of rearmament. Next year, they're due to spend 108 billion euros on their defence. A truly epochal change in Europe.
Yes, indeed. But it leaves us still with one kind of gap, if you will, and that is, well, do we tackle this problem of common foreign and security policy as a whole within the auspices of the European Union, or is there something else that needs to be born from that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what the European Union has been trying to do over the last year is to act more as a geopolitical bloc. Up to very recently, its grand strategy was to export its regulatory system throughout the world. The idea was that the world was an increasingly globalizing place, and through the Brussels effect, it could increase its wealth and influence. But as we've seen with Trump 2.0, the world has become a multipolar, developed into a multipolar order, and Europe has decided that it needs to be one of those polarities, and so it's trying to act more like a bloc.
Right, but if they continue to approach these defense issues, we all know that there's not complete unanimity in the European Union. There are some that block these major decisions. So how can Europe overcome this, and how can it translate all of this massive defense spending into a unified stance that can potentially project power into other regions or other parts of the world, or at least here on the European continent?
Well, up to this week, Europe was focusing on defence, we just described. But it's when the European Council leaders met in the castle in Belgium yesterday, their priority was competitiveness. And I think this is the answer to your question, that yes, they've kind of ticked the boxes on defence procurement and spending, but there's a realisation that if it wants to act as a global bloc, not next year and the year after, but in the next 10 years and even decades into the future, it needs to be more innovative and more competitive, and that's why they discussed the ideas of moving from a single market to one market. What that means in brief is that rather than just being able to sell goods and services from one country to the next without friction, is to remove the final barriers. For example, the idea that a company can register not so much in a country, but on a European level. They call it the 28th regime, and that means that companies, particularly tech companies, startups, can grow at scale without needing to register in so many other countries in the region. The other big thing that they talked about was raising money for investment, in particular creating something that would be close to a common European stock market with a Securities and Exchange Commission, because, for example, the total market capitalisation of all the companies in the European Union equates to about 78% of Europe's total GDP. In the United States, a much more innovative country, that figure is 270% of their GDP. So it shows you how far behind Europe is on getting money into investment. It's estimated that there are, and the reason is that so much money which Europeans hold in low-interest savings accounts. It's estimated that there are about 450 billion euros just sitting idly in these kind of national silos, savings accounts in individual countries. And the European Union wants to create a way to release and activate all that money.
Yeah, that would be great on many fronts, especially for innovation on the continent, which is an area you've mentioned also that we need to take care of. Let's go ahead and play a soundbite from Marco Rubio just before he departed the United States for the Munich Security Conference.
The world is changing very fast right in front of us. The old world is gone, frankly, the world I grew up in, and we live in a new era in geopolitics, and it's going to require all of us to sort of re-examine what that looks like and what our role is going to be. And we've had many of these conversations in private with many of our allies, and they are our allies, and we need to continue to have those conversations, and I think Saturday, hopefully, and the meetings we'll have there will move us in that direction.
All right, so we have a really big debate here in Europe, as is the United States backing away, abandoning Europe? I know it's been an emotional debate over the past year, both from the rhetoric we're hearing out of Washington and the rhetoric we're hearing in European capitals, but I think Secretary of State Marco Rubio put it pretty well there. I mean, those pretty diplomatic terms. Now, in your latest piece, you argue that Europe has woken up. You mentioned that earlier as well. What concrete metrics beyond budget allocations would prove that this awakening has translated into real strategic capabilities here in Europe?
Well, the waking up, as we discussed, is mainly in defence with the safe allocations, the 150 billion euros, of which Poland is getting about 44 billion. The dangers that Europe is facing from that, how to move from creating the mechanism to actually spending the money, and we saw in Poland this week when the Prime Minister and the Cabinet met, and other senior members of the government met with the President at the National Security Council. Some indications that Polish commentators are suggesting could lead to a presidential veto of the bill that needs to go through the Polish Parliament to create the mechanism. It's kind of complicated, but Poland needs to create a mechanism to bring the money to Poland and then to spend it on the 139 defence projects that it's had approved from the European Commission. And it was interesting that bill has gone through the same. It needs to go to the President, but it was interesting that the Law and Justice opposition and the Confederation Party didn't vote for the bill. So there's now an increasing worry that the President might veto it, which will slow that spending down. That's the Polish example, but it's kind of an example that's just creating the mechanism, doesn't automatically lead to tanks and artillery rounds.
Well, right, and a lot of questions actually arise as well. I mean, if you get a big chunk of money and then you have to spend it overnight, there are also legitimate questions as to whether it's being spent in the most effective way on the most effective projects and what have you. But I know that Europe is in kind of this emergency mode right now, trying to gain as many capabilities in the shortest amount of time that it can. How do you think the continent is going to overcome this debate, if you will?
Well, when it comes to defence capacity, I think that it already has quite a bit of defence capacity. There's a figure that a short while ago Europe was producing 200,000 artillery rounds. And that's going to go up either now or shortly to 2 million artillery rounds a year. Also, from the Polish 44 billion safe allocation, it's trying to push as much of that as possible into purchases from within the Polish defence industry up to 2030, because those are the European rules. After 2030, they have to be spread out among other European countries, and that kind of shows that there is the money can be absorbed, for example, in Poland.
Yeah, and that's something that I think the continent definitely needs. We need to be producing this stuff here in Europe instead of just sending the money over to Korea or to the United States. Well, moving on now, we also have a statement from Mark Rutte from the Munich Security Conference. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
We have all the plans in place, as you know, to make sure over the coming years, with the huge investments now taking place, as I said, the Germans doubling their defense spending, the new Dutch government committing to reach as fast as possible the 5%, including the 3.5% core defense spending. What is happening in Poland? Well, I could mention all the allies, Canada back, really stepping up. So we will, over the coming years, get more and more, we will more and more see a NATO, more European-led, but at the same time, the US absolutely anchored in the organization.
A deadline.
We will do this step by step, in close conjunction with the United States, based on the defense planning process we have.
Now, also in your latest piece that will be on our website very soon, if it's not already, the IMF's estimate of intra-EU friction equating to 44% tariffs on goods and 110% on services is absolutely striking. Now, you also suggest that Europe treats its own market sort of like a foreign trade zone. Which specific national protections or regulatory barriers are most emblematic of this said fragmentation?
I think one of the biggest things holding European economy, or the Eurozone economy, and innovation, etc., back is the cost of energy, and everyone's aware of that. But Europe shoots itself in the foot a bit with, for example, putting additional burdens through its carbon emission trading system that companies...
Which has led to deindustrialization and will continue to lead to deindustrialization.
It's one of the contradictions, that Europe wants to boost its industrial capacity, but it has at the same time it has its green policies, and it puts that additional burden. But I think all this talk of boosting the economy goes beyond defence procurement and spending. It's much more long term. One of the main problems that Europe has is its dependency on American tech and generally the digital sphere. America in its new security strategy, needs Europe's industrial capacity linked to its own to face down China. This is its grand strategy over the next number of years and decades. If Europe wants to escape being corralled and garnered into that project, it needs to increase its strategic autonomy. How does it do that? Well, it can't be under the kind of colonization of American digital tech companies, particularly the cloud, artificial intelligence, and it needs to develop its own solutions. But it's very costly. I think just this year, American private tech companies are investing nearly over $500 billion in AI solutions. Europe is on 1 or 2 billion, I'm aware. So this is the mountain that it has to climb.
Yeah, it's from many perspectives, it's already so far behind that playing catch up is going to be very, very difficult. Well, let's go ahead and play this final piece from the Undersecretary of the Department of War for Policy, and this is Eldridge Colby talking there at the Munich Security Conference.
I think 2025, you saw a reframing and a real genuine commitment because of the President's leadership and the SecGen's leadership to actually have a Europe that leads the conventional defense of NATO, which in a sense, as I'm going to say today, is really a return to NATO 1.0. This is a serious alliance focused on defense and deterrence, and it's greatly thanks to your leadership, Mr. Secretary General. And so I think this year we actually have a good message to say, which is now it's time to march out together, to be pragmatic, to be focused on the kind of flexible realism that the national security strategy and the national defense strategy are based on and really exhibit. And I think we have a really strong basis for working together in partnership, but putting NATO kind of a 3.0 NATO that's based a partnership rather than dependency, and really a return to what NATO was originally intended for.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, this return to what NATO was intentionally established for, and going back in some sense to that NATO 1.0 when European nations were spending much more on defense during the Cold War. It hasn't done so for over 3 decades, prioritizing things such as social spending. You mentioned the environmental policies that Europe has. During this major conversion, will Europe be able to kind of reinvent itself in terms of how it spends money, how it gives social support, money for education, money for healthcare, and prioritize? Obviously, that money has to come somewhere to prioritize for defense.
Yeah, at the moment, money for health and education comes from national budgets. I think what we've seen over this period since last Munich is Europe just doing what Europe does, which is taking additional powers for itself, never letting a good crisis go to waste, to continually federalize. Maybe there'll come a time in the future for education and health, but that's not the priority at the moment.
Yes. Okay. Well, federalization. I mean, that could be the boogeyman of Europe in terms of political rhetoric. So I doubt we'll see many leaders saying that they want to further integrate within the European Union itself. But we'll see, because that discussion is one that's very relevant and one that needs to be had. Well, Stuart Dowell, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of News in Depth. Thanks for watching, and stay with us for more here on TV World.